just received more funding. So ultimately what we were just hoping for this meeting is to get your perspectives, what you're seeing. Our main focus is safety in Santa Cruz, making it a safer place for everybody. And so we wanted to invite law enforcement here to talk about what you see on your end. What are some of the hurdles that you're facing? And Marvin, I think you said it perfect earlier. If it's a legislative issue, what ways can we solve that as a community? What can we pressure our leaders to pass to make your job easier and Santa Cruz a safer place for everybody? So,
I'll start. Well, good evening to everybody. Thanks for having me. I think that there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of challenges. I think we have a lot of successes and a lot of good things that are going on, such as the programs that you were talking about. We see a lot of that are very challenging for police officers to try to find solutions to. And historically, we've always been the primary first responders. And we have a significant mental health crisis in our community. We have a significant substance abuse crisis, I believe, in our community that police departments or law enforcement don't necessarily have the right tools in their toolbox. And those are really, the biggest issues that I hear about, whether they're housed or not. Most people would argue those sort of solutions, if you will, to somebody that's in a mental health crisis or somebody that is significantly abusing drugs. Maybe our role in that isn't the right role. That's what we do. Right? I think as a profession, we've gotten a little bit out of our lane, if you will, trying to be social service providers as well as enforcing the law. So we don't just keep doing the same thing over and over. That's, kind of the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over with the same results.
Exactly.
And that's what we do. But that's what we were created to do, right? And so now that it's created a significant, in our county, it's created a significant strain on jail capacity. And obviously I'll allow him to speak to that more specifically, but as well as bandwidth at the mental health level or substance abuse level. The programs just don't exist. They're expensive. They're hard to run, to manage. The telecare facility on SoCal Drive only has so many beds. And so I think that's kind of my opening in a nutshell. I have some more that I can talk about, but I see the mental health and substance abuse as our primary, most significant issues, and the challenges around trying to put law enforcement into those problems.
Yeah, I mean, our operations division faces the exact same problems that Santa Cruz Police face. And a lot of that has to do with you're going out there and we have our small little tool belt of what we can actually do with it, rather than having the resources and all the different avenues that we can filter people towards and try and get them into assistance and that type of stuff. And we lack in that area. I'll cover more on the jail aspect of it from our side of it. Law enforcement as a whole has struggled with staffing. In the last few years, it has been difficult to get more cops on the street, get more correctional officers. Last year, our jail hired 25 people. Seems like a good number, except we lost 26. Granted, some of it is robbing Peter to pay Paul. 13 of those went from our corrections division to our operations division. But then the other 13 of them, one went to another agency. All the rest were lost to retirement or medical injuries, or they left the profession altogether. So our jail has been on mandatory overtime for the last 5 or 6 years. And that mandatory overtime, we're talking an extra 12-hour shift. They're taking between 4 and 6 of those every 6 weeks. So almost every single week they have an extra day, and that's just mandatory overtime. We have an emergency overtime where they get called back, and so they're working a lot, and so it puts a lot of strain on the staff there to be able to provide the resources that we have. The other issue is the resources for the people that are in the jail. So right now, 35 to 40% of our jail is on some sort of mental health medication. And the issue is that with the size of our jail, because of the mental health problem in the jail, we can't program them together. So there's a lot more single cells, single timeout, and that type of stuff. So it limits the actual capacity of the jail because there's so much of the mental health problem. We currently have about 40, but at any given time, it's over 20 inmates that are in our jail that the courts have deemed eligible to release to a program, but there are no beds to send them to. So whether it be substance use, whether it be mental health, whether it be any of that type of stuff, we can send them to a program. There's no beds available. So they stay in jail during that time until beds become available, or they serve out their sentence. Realistically, they're not gaining anything from serving their sentence in the jail. They should be in a program. They should be trying to take those steps during that same amount of time to better themselves and get on the right track. But we just don't have the resources to send them to. And so we do have programs in the jail. So there's a lot of programming and stuff like that that they're allowed to have. But in our current jail, there are 2 classrooms. That's it. The classrooms are not conducive to a good learning environment. We do have a Roundtree facility, which is better for programming, but at our main jail, it's very limited with what we're able to program there. And again, we still have the mental health clientele. And we have a CIT team that does a very good job inside the jail, but it's not the level of assistance that these folks need. And so there's talks of us moving towards getting a new jail, which we are completely outdated. I don't know if anybody's done a tour of the jail or gone through the jail. It's a concrete building. It's not a good environment if people are trying to truly change their life path. It's not a good environment for it compared to some of the modernized jails that are out there. So that's something that we've been asking for a while.
Well, it's almost 45 years old.
I know.
So imagine the technology and just in general, things have changed a lot in the jails, and it's extremely outdated in a number of ways. And I'll add a little bit to that as far as Assembly Bill 109, the prison realignment sort of bills that were voted on and approved by the voters of California overwhelmingly. The state now sends prisoners back to the county jail for the county to manage so they can close prisons. And with that was supposed to come with funding for the county, for the sheriff's office to run programs. That money isn't coming unless we miss the pipeline and direct it somewhere else. So, and there's some other legislative stuff that I will talk to you about, but, Assembly Bill 109, which, gosh, when was that? Back in 2010?
I was right around
2012. So you hear about the prisons that are closing. Well, it's not because people have corrected their behavior and they're being released and they're being good community members. It's because they've been shipped to the local county jails that aren't built for long-term stays. And they're consuming spots that we would like to put people in that are creating unsafe environments for all of you in this community. But instead, the jail has to book them and release them unless it's a violent offense, because there's no place to put them. So, Assembly Bill 109, you could look it up. It's very well known. It's causing problems. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I first of all, I want to say that I've seen the tremendous improvement in the town. And I walked in the town, and walking on sidewalks, in about an hour to 2 hours every day. That's what I do. It's my big thing. And so I've seen a lot of improvements, but I still think what we have here is an open air. Because I work in law facilities and I know what that looks like. And I see those behaviors all the time on the street. And a drug market and everything there. So, and I know we have challenges, okay? I know that, but what are we going to do about this? I want to make sure this is our situation. Are we doing?
You're exactly right. I mean, if you think about, I don't know, the last 5 years at least, maybe even a little bit longer, we've been really, more so as a country, but especially in California, we're about deinstitutionalizing and decriminalizing. And I would argue that you're seeing the results of that. I'm not a proponent of putting people in a jail cell or a prison and locking them up and forgetting about them as human beings. That's not what I'm proposing, but be close. Yeah.
So I'm just going to say, we've got to figure out that. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
I would like to hear what you said.
I mean, it's a great question. It's a valid question. It's very expensive. I don't have the answer for you. I really don't. Obviously, I think we all would agree that most of the time, law enforcement's not the right person to respond to those. I think you're going to see a lot more non-law enforcement sort of response teams that will be developed to more appropriately address some of these people that are in crisis. You also have something that's called the CARES Court that I probably shouldn't speak to because I don't know it well enough, but it is along the lines of, it's going down the road of mandated treatment or mandated medicating somebody that is choosing to not follow what they need. But that comes with controversy, right? And it also comes with lack of funding and ultimately lack of places to put people. Right now as a county, I think the one facility has 16 beds. The one facility that this whole county has 16 beds for crisis, mental health crisis. Yeah. Yeah, the telecare kind of right across from Harbor High. Oftentimes, I will tell you from a law enforcement perspective, we go to take somebody there and they're on what they call a code red because they're full. Right. So that's a failure. I mean, it's a failure for the person that's in the back of our car.
Is that where the care court would be ready to go to? I mean,
no, I think the care court, and again, I don't know if you know more about the care court, but the care court is still being developed and it's probably another year away. But it's ultimately for somebody that is probably has a lot of criminal offenses hanging over their head, but there's a significant mental health situation or psychosis. I think it's going to be for a very narrow group of diagnoses, I guess. And the courts can basically step in and mandate them to take their medication or mandate some sort of treatment. It's not really their choice anymore. But that's a step of what you're talking. That came from the governor's office, and that's a step in that direction. But what I think you're going to start seeing is my answer to your question is really, obviously it comes with a lot of money, but getting back to the point where people are, the government has the ability to institutionalize somebody if they're that dire, if they're causing that many problems, and they're that bad, as far as mental health.
And you could probably name 20 of those people by name here in town that should have guardianship. I'm just guessing you have repeat offenders.
Yeah, no,
I'm can't diagnose them, but
right.
I'm sure you know where that's going to affect.
Yeah,
it's so hard for us to imagine if there's no funding and no real plan how that's going to be enacted.
No, exactly. In my opinion, a lot of the answers or solutions are at a higher level, at the state level. And so I think that the pendulum really swung to an extreme, and you combine the deinstitutionalization and the decriminalization all at the same time as the defunding of the police. And although we were never defunded, it's certainly really difficult to recruit people that want to do this job because of the national narrative. And so oftentimes I'll look back at the community, and I'm not saying that anybody here was part of that charge, right? But that came with consequences. Right now, you talked about staffing like at the jail. Right now, I'm celebrating because I'm at 70% of staffing level.
Yeah.
And that's a celebration.
Right.
Because about a year and a half ago, I was probably at about 58, 59. Right now, I can't imagine having, 24 more police officers that I'm budgeted for. Council supports me. City manager supports me. The mayor supports those 24 more police officers. We can't find them.
How do you do it? I mean, if we have a fire position bill, 87 people apply, and I mean, if we adjust pay, it feels like 87 people apply.
Kind of,
We can take some of that and consider it.
but kind of the big piece that the chief pointed on is the narrative. When was the last time we had a negative narrative on firefighters?
Oh, no.
Right. And so we saw a drastic drop in that. I can remember applying and there were 200-300 people there applying for the same positions that I was applying for. Now we're lucky to get 10. The narrative took a lot of people and moved them away from even thinking about law enforcement career. Don't get
me wrong. In some respects, we deserved it as a profession.
Sure.
We own that, right? And we need to own that and get better at it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we didn't deserve that in a certain way, but it does come with some challenges. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, for everybody.
Yeah. And a lot of the problems that we run into, we talked about AB 109, you have problem 4757. A lot of those, when we talk about decriminalizing certain crimes so that they're not a prison crime, they go from a felony to a misdemeanor. You're talking about taking that, which has some statistical backing, but it was cart before the horse. Sure, is substance use a disorder and a disease and doesn't need to be treated and not institutionalized? Yes, but they didn't provide, when that came out, they didn't provide the infrastructure to even be able to deal with it. We don't have the facilities to treat substance use. And the thing is the folks that are especially the unhoused and that type of population, they go right back into the areas that they were using before. It's almost impossible to stay clean in that type of environment. They have to change the direction of where they are, and they have to have the resources to get there. And we just don't have it as a community. And that's the big problem, is a lot of times we get leaned on to find the solution to a problem that's really a social problem. And it's a treatment problem, and it's not a law enforcement problem because we don't have that resource to treat those things. We need that type of stuff. And I know that our board of supervisors have heard those concerns, and they're very aware. And I know that they're trying to make changes in that direction because they need it. The issue is the funding aspect of it. Where does that money come from to support that?
I'm under the impression that we use that with, if you had all the nonprofits that are doing homeless, homeless funds, why not? If you had a panel of all of them, plus law enforcement, and we all came to a little bus system of, hey, what do we do? How can we help? And then how can we actually bring supervisors and actually call some money out to actually alleviate grants? I think that's a huge start of like doing something impactful and also not like, oh, let's do this in 10 years. It's like, we could do this within a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about finding that funding. And we support that aspect of it because that helps us do the job and actually deal with the crimes that we're really needed for instead of being detracted with handling stuff that really we just don't have the infrastructure to give to people. So we go out there to deal with them, and a lot of people that we deal with on the street or housed and unhoused, they're looking for help.
Exactly.
We just don't. There's not the infrastructure to support it.
The grant is there. And we all have grant writers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Come up with something.
There's hands everywhere. I think you have the first hand early.
So when I wanted to ask you, are you doing jail tours again? Because during COVID,
I know that one went.
completely out the door, but I would suggest that for Betty and Frank here. Yes, we could coordinate with you because I've been through you for tours and sat and talked with the inmates to that when it's very acceptable. And I agree with the new campaign to help better shape. Talk to your sheriff about that. And then one other thing that came up actually with the grand jury at one point in time. I know if I can bring it back to. We have a juvenile probation department. We literally spend millions of dollars, like $5 million for 8 to 10, maybe 12 kids in a year. That is an incredible facility that the taxpayers are paying for. And there's a beautiful new facility in Monterey that would actually be closer for some of those juveniles to visit family. But just saying, I'm going to bring that up again. And that's kind of been a campaign and talk to the supervisors about it as well, because it has a courtroom, it has rooms, it has an incredible kitchen, it has facilities for parking, it has a baseball field, the gyms, and we're spending an incredible amount of money up there.
What you're in surgery, I think part of the problem is Monterey doesn't want kids. That's what I've heard.
Asia for going up downhill? Yes. Okay. So it's on the last one. Yeah, it's in the services. It's not in the. Okay.
I'm so sorry. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying we're spending too much money on that, or can we imitate that with our jails?
No, I'm saying both.
Okay.
I'm saying both. I believe we need a new jail facility. I believe it should be voted upon as soon as possible. Braintree's not being used, but that's because of personnel. But the grand jury brought this up 4 years ago, maybe. I know it was before COVID. And we're spending millions of dollars on that juvenile facility. And they said, oh, we have to keep it open because we're waiting for some juveniles to come back from the state facility. Those juveniles have been going to Sonoma. So they're on here.
What happened to the money that we're paying for?
We're still paying.
Just to keep it open, not to see individual. Okay. Okay. I'm up to speed now.
And the number of kids that are up there is like 8 to 12. How many to 12? How many kids like used to have? I mean, probably 10 and 30. It used to hold lots. They used to keep kids. It's a whole other conversation.
Now I think most of the kids that are up there are in there for significant violent crimes. So
Significantly, yes.
I know they have a number of side suspects, that type of stuff that are in there.
So just stands out.
Yeah,
Yes, it was just something Corey said, and I know Nick was talking about it. What I've noticed that helps bring change and getting like the government and the state to buy into it is putting it on paper. Meaning, like you meant, like Corey said about the nonprofits, because I also, in my own way, I advocate. Like I'm definitely in the part when I see two officers the other day, when I talk to the front of the house, I like to make sure it's safe. Just try to be the mediator, keep men out there from other women, just different things like that, because I know you guys got other things to focus on. And I know we haven't really met yet. We have our time. But I'm big on just finding out exactly what you guys see, having that on paper. Then we as nonprofits, like you mentioned, like the panel, we could come together and wrap it out. Because it's just like someone going to get a business loan. They want to see your blueprint. They want to see what you're going to use the money for. So without that, without right vision, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to keep having I call it the hamster wheel, going in circles, not going anywhere. So everyone in this room, whether police or not, we all want change. And I know that's another reason why I came to this town. So it's one of these things I'm getting on paper, finding out what you guys need, seeing how we all can come together and help each other out. Then just like Free Guy, they have a list of all these resources. They can come up with some type of paperwork where you guys can have at your office and be like, hey, you're going through something. Hey, outside of 211, because a lot of people aren't familiar with that number, 211, they can give you different resources, homelessness. If you're looking for a facility, you're looking for whatever you're looking for. So just having it on paper and having it with you guys, and then, both ways. So it's just like, at the end of the day, no one's missed out because, again, I understand the role. I almost became a police officer. A lot of people don't know that. But it's just like, I get what you're supposed to focus on. It's nice to see you guys walk around, but it should be like, okay, I'm trying to be the social worker, the case manager, mommy, daddy, and police officer. It's just too much. They get burnt out,
Maybe officers, you still want to
when the officer said, like, I'm making my thing, I need to be out in the field. Like, for instance, when I go to Depot Park, I can just randomly just drive around and talk to people. Because I know, of course, when you're in, in uniform and you're in a car, you guys are tied up. You got to be at certain places. But if I know I need to be over here, I need to be able to freely move, if that makes sense.
No, you're exactly right. And it goes kind of to your first question about what can we do, right? And I think the collaboration with the nonprofits and people in the community that want to make a difference is extremely important. I think reaching out to your state representatives and having those sort of conversations, whether it's by email or whatever, they're busy, but I think it's important for them to hear from the community about the issues and struggles that we're having. I would also stay very informed on what you're voting for. Lieutenant mentioned Prop 4757. I always tell people, Proposition 47 was titled like Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act, right? That's the title of that. So when you read that, you're like, oh yeah, I'm busy, right? I'm not going to read all this fine print. Well, what that did was it decriminalized possession of drugs. That's one part of it, right? There's other bad parts to it, but that's one that probably mostly affects us in the sense of possession of heroin, possession of methamphetamine is now a misdemeanor offense. And it used to be a felony where we would take the person to the jail. Now we write them a ticket and we release them. Now, again, the jail isn't the answer, but I've talked to people that have used to be addicted, and they would admit that 24-hour sort of timeout was effective for them. Not all of them, but some of them would make a different decision in that moment that they were tired of that, right? Now there's no more timeout. And they literally go around the corner, down the street to the next park and continue to do what they do. Okay. So be careful what you're voting on and don't just read the title because it's very deceptive.
If I could piggyback on that too.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot of about the cycle of things and how it's not the police's job to solve social issues, right? You have the tickets or jail are ultimately your tools. So if we were to put aside the services and focus on that, on the enforcement side of it. So we have drug dealers here, right? So I'm curious, like, is there a current plan to kind of tackle this? And people laugh at me. I just learned about the heroin highway, and I am curious, like, because this is just the way my mind works. Like, why isn't there an officer there all the time? If like people come out of the area to go there to buy drugs, why not do that? And so that's my question of, the law enforcement side of it. Let's take the services somewhere else, and let's maybe focus you guys on getting like the drug dealers. So what's the current plan there?
Yeah, agreed. A couple things with that. One is it's very resource intensive to actually get the dealer. We get a lot of the buyers, the users, the addicts. To actually get the dealer, now you're talking about significant amount of time and resources on surveillance. You're potentially talking about undercover operations, which come with safety concerns. If you're talking about, let's say, up in Pogonip, the terrain, they have lookouts. It's just not that easy. They don't sell drugs in front of us, right? Obviously. So to actually catch the dealers is much more challenging. The flip side to that is that I have to decide the amount of resources to put towards that when I know that when they go to court, they don't get sent to prison. They don't. It's a non-violent crime. In fact, they're barely even getting jail time. So
and
they don't,
like fentanyl and heroin, they don't go to jail.
No. Not for any significant amount of time. No. There's no room. So it's not a violent crime. So it's very, in a way, I have to weigh the amount of resources and time that I'm going to spend, the bang for my buck, so to speak, right? But I agree with you. I wish I actually had more bodies to do more enforcement on the dealer side of it.
Yeah.
I really do, because the win there is when you confiscate all of their product, and not only that, flee all their money.
Yeah.
Because that's more painful than anything that the criminal justice system is going to do today. So the sad part of it is that there's no consequences for it. But I agree with you that we should put more pressure and more resources towards it.
There is a law that's being written about dealing with dealers who are selling, especially.
That makes me happy. That gave me goosebumps.
There's a law right now. I'm not sure where it is in the system. You can look up, somebody go and put that on.
Okay.
There's a lot.
And it's in
Punishment, is that what you're saying, for stricter punishment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
and then when you
Because
talk,
the parents. It's the parents that are fighting for their kids.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's wrong and that's yeah. So I believe it's in the works. I don't know. Yeah.
I will.
and when you talk about the labor intensive side of especially the dealing investigations, we have a special enforcement team that does a lot of that. But think about right now, if you were to open your cell phone, how many text messages do you have in that? How many photos? How many emails?
Yeah.
How many things? So not only do we have the whole front end time consumption of that, but there's an expectation when we show up at court that we have as much evidence as possible, which means a search warrant for that cell phone, and then manually going through all the text messages, all the photos, all of that to build a bigger case. So one sales case can take up an entire week. So you think about a unit that's all they do. It could take them up to a week just to have one solid sales case ready for the DA's office that then doesn't get a lot of time. And so that was, I ran our special enforcement team for a few years, and that it was, the goal was taking money and drugs and booking those in and knowing that you're not going to get a lot of return on it. There were some cases. It's interesting because more people are dying from fentanyl and heroin overdoses than methamphetamine. But even at the federal level, methamphetamine actually has a bigger hammer than those two. So a certain amount of methamphetamine has a mandatory minimum at the federal level of 10 years, where heroin and fentanyl are a few years, which is incredible to me. I'm sure they're trying to figure something out with that, but you have that issue where even if you went to a federal level with it, they're not getting significant time unless they have a large amount of methamphetamine, which we're not getting. That's not the we have it, but that's not the main problem that we have.
Heroin, those are the two main problems.
Yeah.
As far as substance abuse, I think methamphetamine has ruined our town. Now, having said that, obviously fentanyl, you have all the overdoses. But the methamphetamine, the psychosis that causes and the mental health issues that overlap with that, I think that has been the worst thing for our community. I mean, when I was a younger cop, I would see people shooting up heroin. I thought that was the word, whatever. No, I think methamphetamine has been a game changer.
And a big jump to that is the polysubstance. So they're using polysubstance abuse. So it's using either meth or cocaine and heroin and fentanyl, and they're using them together. And so that is even worse because that addictive property of that heroin that they're pushing for. Meth has an addictive property, but the actual physical withdrawals from heroin are so much stronger. But when they get into that polysubstance abuse, they're on a heroin timeline, which means that they know how long it's going to be before they start getting sick. And so they have to get that next fix, but they're so committed that they're mixing the two.
So both of you mentioned ultimately that you have to weigh, the benefits to use resources. And it sounds like getting the dealers too much resources and not a bit. So what is the other side of that? What is the plan?
Realistically, I mean, a law passing like that, something that stiffens the sentences for the dealers, because I mean, let's be real about it. The dealers are preying on people that are addicted. They're preying on the people that have the disease of addiction. And so making it a stiffer sentence for the dealers will ultimately have a better long-term goal because you have a little bit more of that bang for your buck when it comes to the amount of time. It's not that we don't go after dealers, we do on a regular basis, but they're a dime a dozen. I mean, there's so many of them that we don't have enough resources to actually impact that because, that dealer has a couple smaller dealers. Well, you pick that one up and all they're going to do is step into that place. And then they're going to keep the business rolling. They're going to be putting money on the books of that dealer if he's in custody for whatever. And so it continues to move on. So
it's 86.75 and 87. Those are the two that came out basically for 28.
Yeah, for sure.
About like a resource at all, not necessarily going after like the dealers, but just like having your presence. Like, I don't know if you guys are like in Coconut, like walking around. Does it do you think that deters people from selling drugs, using drugs, or do they just not care? Like, your football police, out there, would they be like, this is the area to be at? People will be there, just being around all areas of that kind of reduce the crime in that area, even if you're not necessarily making an arrest, just being there, people not wanting to deal with you guys.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if we're there, the issue is being able to have the resources and the bandwidth to do that consistently, right? I mean, any given day for the city of Santa Cruz during, daytime, I have anywhere between 6 and 8 police officers working the whole city. And so if I won't put just one officer up in Hogan because of the location and it's so far away, right? So if I have to pull 2 bodies out of the city to go stand up there so they stop doing what they're doing, that's not sustainable for the rest of the city. It's hard, right? It just comes down to a resource issue. But while we're there, yeah, they would go somewhere else and go do what they want to do. It's kind of a short-term fix, but it's challenging because of staffing.
And we run into the same thing. We have 8 to 10 deputies on patrol for the entire county.
Yeah.
So it's where can we station them in one spot that they're not going to they're gonna leave the rest of that whole area open because they're on a fixed post somewhere. So it's a tough battle.
I mean, I think that they're, as you saw in San Francisco, they're bringing in like state level folks to deal with their street level dealing. That has crossed my mind. You know, I know that, you know, there were a team from the sheriff's office. They helped when we were working on the benchlands issue and made some arrests and stuff. But a drug dealing arrest is very complicated. I guess there's also a lot of layers to it where you can't just get them on one time exchanging drugs. Right, because then the defense is, well, I'm a drug user. I have a substance abuse problem. I was just lending it to this person. I was letting them use it. Right, you have to track them over multiple times of dealing drugs. It's not really simple to send an undercover officer dressed down to go buy drugs because you have to do, you know, you have to intro into that person's network before they trust you. It's very complicated. It's not as easy as it seems.
So what I'm hearing is staffing, services, legislation are the three big hurdles that you're facing currently.
Yeah, when you say services, you're referring to like programs.
Yeah, available services
Yeah.
for people to actually go to.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. It's like the lieutenant talked about, or you know, or yeah, I think it was you that talked about, and I call it the continuum of care, right? We had people on the benchlands that would actually go to a program.
Right.
Well, 30 days later, they were out. They had no support. They didn't have a family to go to. So they came walking right back into the benchlands. And what did they start doing? Using drugs today.
Right.
So the continuum of care, I mean, it's different for everybody. Some people can quit smoking just cold turkey. Oh, I'm done, right? Some people, I mean, it'll take them years, right? And it's no different. It's a chemical that your body is craving, right? So just think of it kind of, I guess, in a simplistic way like that, where some people can just quit heroin cold turkey. Some people go in and out of programs all their life and may never survive. And some of them do. Some of them go to a 30-day program and they're okay. Some is just a cycle of life for them. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And kind of on that same cycle, just real quick, it's kind of like the jail, that whole time out where if they're in there for 5 hours, 6 hours to just sober up a little bit, they haven't got over the hurdle to accept the resources. So they're being given options, though limited, but they're not in that mental state to do it. They have to go through that detox to get into that mental state to even potentially look at that future. Is right in that moment, they're at 5, 6 hours. Sure, they're not high anymore as it would be defined, but they know that, hey, I'm 2-3 hours away from getting sick. So they're going to kick me out. I have 2 to 3 hours to find my next fix. Otherwise, I'm going to get sick. And so that's what's on their mind, rather than getting them through that and having them come out and have a program to go to springboard to that next level, same, level of care.
Right.
So during the winter storms, January, big one, that's January 9th, I was operating there was with the vegetable. I was operating the severe weather emergency shelters through the city and counties and Cruz. One of the biggest benefits that I saw there was actually law enforcement and our agency working together during that critical time. And one of the best benefits actually of that is that you had assigned Carver Jones to the beginning of that detail. And it was just seamless, like conversation. If you need me, I got you, but you guys are the professionals, and we got this. And for the most part, without having police presence, but we were able to, we've been doing this work for 7 years now. Maybe housing, I'm a house veteran, so this building is very important to me. So it is very important to me. But just having that communication, having that conversation and being like, hey, you know it's us and I know it's us in my field. And just, when I need you, you guys came, there's really no stuff I saw, and I saw happen to me, so I'm just like all types of years. But when you do that, I just know, let's do this together. That's when you can start to see programs being created, reach out to other general fund. We can take money from underperforming places and start to actually build.
Yes.
But we all need community buy-in, and that's why I'm coming up. We're coming to. I had a career in Kingston also, so I used to really more did across the country, trainings across the country, and also. So we're looking to like build upon that, but the thing is, you need the moments in the community, you need the moments in the police, the service providers, and people. And if we can all start to have that conversation, even if we just did an email list, we started to build blocks, I think that's what it really is.
Well, I agree with Chief Escalante that the methamphetamine situation has taken a turn in the way a lot of people don't know about. Years past, the way it was manufactured was with more natural chemicals, if you can use that word. Now, the way it's being manufactured, the user will lose brain function and never recover. So we see that around Santa Cruz. People who lost it. People on heroin can maintain. I've known heroin addicts that had jobs and went to work. In terms of the fentanyl situation, they're trying to create a new law, I think, that makes for a deed.
Muting them. Sorry, guys. Carry on. Oh, now we got him.
When a dealer supplies fentanyl to someone who dies of an overdose, it's a homicide. So there's force being put there. The methamphetamine situation might have a higher risk or sentence statewide, but what do we do with all of these methamphetamine casualties that will never function in society ever again? And I was told by someone who lived in a homeless camp, it's cheaper to buy a hit of meth than it is to get a can of beer.
Yeah, the meth market is next to nothing. It's very cheap to buy that.
If you're interested in sending his book, the report from the only expense line, follow up the Greenland, which we're about that. Any thoughts about how when the formula changed, when we stopped using pseudo that became an industrial product coming out of Mexico, but it's also a psychotic. So you need at least 6 months of support. They get from the time they come off of prison, that person's going to be in mess for the next 6 months. And we don't have any sort of institutions so it's deal with that. That's we have those 16 beds.
Yeah, and they're revolving really quick. They're not there for 6 months.
And how does that compare to other things?
I'm sorry, what was?
I would say kind of a long-term support or the kind of those 16 beds that we have for population through those
For mental health.
for the mental health, how does that compare?
I don't know if I could answer that.
One thing you're gonna have a hard time finding a comparable county in the state of California. There's really only, you look at the demographics of the county, the size, geographically, There's not really one to compare. But a lot of people want to say, well, look at San Luis and this stuff. Not the same. These are different. I want to go back for just a second about the part about the dealing with revenue. Because Chief knows I did a little of that myself and once upon a time. One of the things we've discovered is that we sometimes feel we're going up the wrong way. I'm not going to fix it by trying to go after the street users like they're asking them. That's he's already described that. What happens is that we miss the point. Why do we sell the drugs in the first place? Because there's a market for it. So you got to go the other way perhaps and focus more on getting rid of the addiction. We deal with the addiction early on, but the cause of those addictions. You probably would be better off spending money on education and housing for the folks who are on the margins, but education for parents and teachers so they can recognize the side or warning signs of somebody who's fallen into the addiction trap and dealing with that on the front end. The only reason this drugs are pouring across the border is because there's a profit to be made. They cut off the purpose of the fail, and nobody's going to do it. We could drive the cars and run on gas, what will happen? Same thing. So I think sometimes we're focusing on the wrong solution. And if you're not going to provide care and education and counseling and therapists, they're going to just they'll find some other drug. You can make a federal super felony where it's like a feds 10-year minimum mandatory. Do that stuff. But I can tell you, and I think the chief and lieutenant would agree. I've interviewed probably thousands of people in my career, and not one of them ever said, I thought about the consequences before I did what they did. It's only when they were looking at going to jail, they started scrambling through. I think most things, and you yourself straight. And then they start trying to bullshit the way I'm in prison. So they don't even think of homicide. You can make it a homicide and kill somebody. The homicide being hard when full of people taking it out of church. So think about it. We're going after the wrong way.
So are you talking about everyone getting the user drug?
It's about the treatment side of it.
Well, but
Dealing with the addicts and getting them out of the addiction.
I think one of the things we would like is that you basically think that criminalizing the use of drugs is really treatment. Your focus is to try to figure out how to, once they're on that path, do something about it. The criminalization, I say, particularly dealers needing all the time. They're dealing with them. I have a son who was addicted, right? And he was clean for 3 years. He came back to therapy, and he was high with he was hooked on methamphetamine and heroin in a matter of 3 months. After 3 years of clean, he is on the street, out of the street.
That's really something. You're not going to eliminate the feelings. Complete, because, like the chief was saying, it's kind of like, it's like whack-a-mole or whacking something in a petri dish. We hit a piece of mercury in a petri dish, it's flat. That's what happens to the feelings. They scatter, they come back, and then nature pours back, and it's sad that some other kid will walk off the street figures and leave money. But if you're dealing with like your son or any other relative, then unless you deal with the addiction part of your mind, you're always going to find a way to somebody to find
What do you do? How do you get them off drugs when you think? I have to talk to people in San Luis Park. I was afraid that I would do my parents. I don't want to talk to people that were. And Santa Cruz is one of the easiest places on the coast to get drugs. That's what I was told by Santa.
I hate to say it, but they can't come back.
For me,
They can't come back. He can't come. He had a friend, his son came back and he was detained for years.
Oh,
You can't come back.
I know, and that's, but that's, we have a culture in this town. It's a, it's as a group, as law enforcement, we all get on the same page.
Yeah.
Around changing the culture in Santa Cruz and we should have the drive.
But and if I can, it's not just a Santa Cruz thing, and she has a right on point with it, in the sense that everywhere, no matter where you're at, if you're using and you have substance use disorder and you get clean, it needs to be away from where you were. Because just like any other addiction, whether it be smoking, whether it be alcohol, whether it be whatever, there are certain triggers that will trigger you back to that use. And typically it's all those places that you used before. Yeah. And so, I mean, I've heard of people changing, like going to rehab and their family changing all the furniture in their house and all that, because that chair reminds them of their use. And so when they come home, that's the draw, and it keeps calling. Addicts, and we can, substance use disorder is what, the thing is, but they're addicted, and and they're going to be addicted for a very long time. Like they'll be an addict forever, because it only takes that one trigger to fall back into it, whether it be some stressor in their life, whether it be whatever it is. And it's a dual pronged issue in the sense that a lot of our people that start with their use start for different reasons. They got to that starting point from a different reason, and they get to their clean point through a different path. So you can't say that every person addicted, this is the path to take. They all have a different path. And a lot of those people, they have underlying cause that you have to treat that as well as the addiction. And if you're not doing both, one will off balance the other, and they'll go right back into the cycle.
So something you just said is the vital point of, in order to get to the root of the issue, you have to have compassion. And that's one of the things that this town lacks. Because we have many people say, oh, I want to see change, I want to see better things in the community. But if the compassion is not there, you talk to someone where they're addicted, whether they're unhoused or even housed, if they feel you're not compassionate, they're not going to want to take your help. So if we can deal with our hearts on why we do what we do, then I think that's the change we're going to want to see, because the change starts with the person in the mirror. So it's like daily, I'm working on who I am. I can easily say, oh, that person over there needs to work. But I'm like, no, it's all about the delivery. Talk to the person where they are. Some of them, they share their story, but then find out what they need short term and long term, and go from there. But when we see that passion, that's when you see positive change, and that goes to anything. So
I agree with what you're saying, but I also agree with his messaging. Yeah, and I work with a lot of neighborhoods, and a lot of neighbors. So they're from. We've compassionate. We've been so compassionate. We've just completely burnt out. We're done. So it's so complicated because it has to do with state measures. It has to do with funding and supporting our police and sheriff's department. But that messaging also needs to change. Like, don't come here to your business. I also, I say this, I volunteered with you too. And I really believe that our police department is one of the best in the state in dealing with this. Oh yeah. And not enough times do they get supported for all the instruments that they do. So that's one of the messages. What I also say is they're really good at catching the bad news. And they don't boast about it, but they are really good at catching the bad news. And I'm always like, wow, how'd you do that? And they're like a dog with a bone, and they don't let go, and they keep finding the pieces they need to find. And they need the community support in order to do that as well. But the messaging needs to go out there. We are a compassionate community, but don't compare and do this because we care about our community. Yes.
Also, put together same city. This was, 15 years ago, we passed city ordinance where once we was to make marijuana a priority.
Yes.
Over each one of those. And we did make the woman's, we give the community when we do that from the office. Just don't even bother with it. And that was before they made.
Yeah.
And so you give the proximate. They give it the citizen. I don't know, I think you got to be careful what you wish for. And then some giving the state who are all over this. But if you go back, I think I was saying this before earlier, went from problem to crisis, now it's beyond the crisis.
Dumpster fire.
And we had never done anything about it. We get there, you gotta appreciate all the things, so I was going to say you have to keep on. The police don't make laws, they don't create jobs, they build houses. That's not their role. We've gone the wrong way, the other part of the cities reacts to. There was about 15 years behind the curve for response to the crisis. We saw that we started the technology that they did should have all right.
We get it last.
Get it right.
After the Cruz.
Yeah, I was around and they were getting those Commodore 64 computers. Everybody else was getting pretty rapid. And that kind of stuff. So there's the government student on things. Have to accept that. Those factories said that their only job is their only job really is to arrest people or to defer people from causing harm. That the job of the district attorney is to make a decision whether to prosecute or to have a discussion about bringing money. That's then discussion about why is it this stuff happening. That's the public defender. Why is it defending for the committed crime? Don't have the answers for that. The public probation, though, where are all these programs we're doing? Where are they online? Because everyone's a guy. And then consider that what you do is ultimately up to the courts. The police are not the ones that even really enforce the law. All they do is submit the report, run the analysis. So often kind of the that's coming in the ranges. The carriage gatherer of the city along years. The people accident, you want you to turn around and put it in you until it's personal. And so I think your kids go to jail. Oh, so wait a minute, I didn't know. We're doing this thing on Mission Street. So it's all. Be careful what you wait for. Very concerned about the.
So I want to respect Bernie and Nick's time. Thank you so much for coming. If you wanted to end on a note, I mean, the stage is yours.
Well, I'll just say this sort of involvement and engagement is important. And having these difficult conversations, you educating us educating you, hopefully about, our challenges and our struggles. We have to do this together. We have to do it as a village to change the culture. I've always said that the police department doesn't establish the culture of a community. The community establishes the culture of the community. And we have a pretty unique culture here in town. Let's be honest, right? It didn't get this way overnight, and it's not going to change overnight. And I always tell people that when they say, well, why can't we be like Carmel? Why can't we? Well, you're talking apples and oranges. So, but this engagement and your involvement and getting involved, and whether it's grant writing and you know, the work that you've done, or just, you know, coming to these meetings, talking to the DA's office, talking to your state legislators, those are the things that make change. Now, it might be 15 years before you see the change, but that's how it happens. So I appreciate your time. You're all busy, and it's important though to be involved and ask questions. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank everybody for having me out again. Apparently I did okay the last time. But you know, it's one of those things where, I mean, the reality of it is that we are a community. We're just a piece of this community. And so realistically, we have our positions and where we're at, but getting groups together like this, you're the voice of that community because you are the community members. So building this and reaching out and getting the ear of those people that can make those changes at a higher level that positively impact us as a community is huge. Getting those resources, finding those alternative measures and those alternative things for the folks that are impacting you and impacting us, and working together to try and heal the community a little bit is huge. So I just want to thank you for your time. I also brought these. I can leave these. You'd asked about programs at the jail, so this is actually like a 9-page packet of all the programs that we have at the jail. So I don't have enough. Unfortunately, I didn't know what the number was going to be, so I have like I think 10 or 11 of them. But it's just it gives you kind of an idea of stuff coming up. Yeah, it's the programs that we have available, and yeah, it should be I think on our website. It is a public document, so. We do post a lot of that stuff. So,
nonprofits that you think are working that we can help support, or are there systems, your mental health liaisons, are they working? Do we need to promote that or request more of it? Or I mean, is there anything that we can be doing to help you guys sort of?
Well, yeah, I really think that the mental health liaisons that partner with our agency, their agency, and are in the field are huge. We just need more of them, right? Yeah. But what you will see is a lot more programs around mobile crisis response, and I spoke to that a little bit, and there'll be funding needs for that. So, you know, the grant writing, you know, that sort of stuff I think is important. So, yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any action items to take care of?
I'll wrap up. I just wanted to not make them feel cheap, the chairs.
Oh, no.
Thank you so much. Thanks. As far as I wanted to add to what you were saying, you know, like what's the plan? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
As far as what the plan is, like that's our goal as a group. That's why we're having the subsequent meetings from different perspectives, is to try and get an idea of this picture, where the cycle is and where we can start breaking it up. So next up, I think it's the housing options, right? Yeah, so we're going to have a couple of speakers come at the next meeting, and then the following one is the DA, right? I believe so. And probation. Yeah, and so after that is services, and Larry and Wally is coming. But I had also asked Evan. I think I asked Evan, but if not, I'm going to write him. You're in chit chat.
Santa Cruz Neighbors is already planning a meeting with Corey on June 13th.
and if you
Don't want to step on each other's toes, but it's not more than that. So
Cool.
And we can get information. We can.
Anybody got any business cards? Any information?
You were going to say something?
and then if you connected with SafeRx.
No, what is that? Tell me.
So SafeRx is a not, I believe they're a nonprofit, or they might be county funded now. I'm not 100% sure on that aspect of it, but they've been around for years. I dealt with them when they were first starting up. Yeah, and so they do it's a lot of substance use based education and resources and all that. They do a lot of training around Narcan.
It's really campus.
Okay.
And it's, community prevention for organizations still have.
Oh, and they changed their,
No,
Or is it-
We did cigarettes, alcohol,
yeah.
vaping, whatever.
So they do a lot of outreach and education for that aspect of it. Because I mean, the reality of it is the education piece is huge. Not only getting to the teens or the early teens before they start dabbling in that, but getting to the parents as well. Because you'd be surprised at how naive a lot of parents are. Because they don't know. And so they go to one of these presentations. So I presented throughout the county on drug stuff for 12 plus years. And it went from prescription drugs, hey, lock up your prescription drugs, do all that. And now they're not looking for prescription drugs. Now all the prescription drugs on the street are fentanyl laced. They're all being pressed and shipped into the United States. And in a pill form. So most of the blues or the M30s that are out on the street are fentanyl. That's how they're being processed. The Xanax bars are being processed with just fentanyl. And that's what I'm seeing huge seizures being grabbed on the freeways. And a lot of those are these pre-pressed pills. It's not fentanyl coming in a powder form, though we do find plenty of that. But now they're starting to pre-press it and push that out in a pill form. So it's no longer grabbing, it's kind of gone by the wayside because Purdue got hammered pretty hard, but Purdue Pharma, that was the big thing, the Oxycontin craze. And so that when I first started presenting, that's what it was about. It was about Oxycontin, and it was about all the ways that people are getting it and how easily it was being prescribed out. And that we're feeling the effects of that now. Because that created our heroin users that then created a lot of environments that a lot of our heroin users, their kids are getting into drugs as well, because that's the environment they've grown up in. And so it's created this transition. I mean, not every user started from a parent that was, but it does kind of create that snowball effect. And a lot of our older users of opiates started with the prescription pills, and it was a lot of times it was legitimate reasons. One of my best friends growing up, she's addicted to heroin, and she started blowing out her knee in high school and got Oxycontin, and then slippery slope, and now she's living on the street. Somehow she found her way here from the Sierras, and I ran into it. How that happens, I have no idea, but and it's hard because everybody knows somebody that's dealing with that. So like with her, I mean, how I ended up running into her is her family reached out to me because they knew she was in Santa Cruz and she walked away from her rehab. So I ended up finding her, getting her a bed back in rehab, like getting everything set up. She no-showed on it and ran into her not that long later because she decided to steal something on camera. And the only cop in this whole community that would have pulled up the camera photo and be like, oh, I know that person because she's not from here. And so it goes down that road, but it's dealing with that. And it's hard because they always find that it's that move away, right? But then got linked up with the wrong person in rehab. They both walked out together. He had connections here and down the road she went. But that big push of education to the parents is huge because realistically, they need to know what they're looking for, because if they don't catch it early, by the time a lot of times they catch it, they're way late in the game. And now we're talking years of use where it was happening, where there were small key indicators throughout that process that had they seen those things and keyed into it. It's hard. It's hard as a parent to be like, hey, I want to give you some space, but at the same time, like my kid, I have almost 16-year-old. He knows that cell phone belongs to me, not to him. So anytime he doesn't get to change password, otherwise the phone gets shut off. And anytime I want to look at it, I own the cell phone. So, and it's one of those where it's like I trust him in the decision that he makes, but at the same time, I have to be conservative with what I do. And maybe because I see a lot of the worst of it. I'm a little bit harder on that, but it's parents. I know, right? And a lot of times it's that concept of there's no way that's my kid. Like I've had parents show up and I'm like, hey, I found all this stuff on your kid. Oh, that's not my kid. That must be someone else's. And it's like, no, this is a problem. Like we need to hit it head on and we need to like start going down the route of treatment. And if you don't, this is going to keep going back. And it's recognizing, and a lot of it comes from the destigmatization of an addict, right? No one wants their kid to be an addict. Or have a substance use disorder or whatever it is. That's not their kid. And they think that by getting that label that defines them. Well, sometimes getting them to the treatment and having them on the other side, that's what defines them. And so getting them that help. So sometimes even parents are resistant to going to getting their kid into treatment because that then labels them. And they're going to be labeled that. Well, they're going to eventually get there with a label. Let's get them the treatment so that now they're recovering. Addict rather than someone that still does. Right?
If you haven't seen the movie Sick, I highly recommend it because a doctor got addicted to oxycontin.
Yep.
And it's based on a true story. That explains how the whole oxycontin thing turned into the whole heroin thing. It's Sick.
It's Sick. Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Yeah, DOPE.
So a lot of what we've been hearing is about the services. And I feel like that's such a big part of this cycle is the services and what's available. So I would love to hear from everybody about services that they've heard of that is working or in different areas, because that's like a big part of our goal here is to fix this problem and fix this cycle. So you guys know how to reach us. Our email, safety and sanity is the best way. And we would love to hear more from everybody else, because I mean, it's just us and we can use some input. And then if you have any recommendations besides Save RX, thank you.
Just a little part
How they do it.
Yes. Is that in the B one? The little. Yeah, the little building. Oh, wow.
Anyway, the important thing about that particular program is that they expect that the people who come to them, ask for help, they expect them to succeed. They're not allowed to show them. They set the numbers, consistent, values.
I love that.
Yeah. And that way, and I talk about the student. They don't have any boundaries out there. So I mean, it's like consistent boundaries are what people need to have.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but you can help you. Look at Santa Cruz Street teams and stuff. They wear yellow shirts and they come around, they walk out in the morning. I just see them in the morning.
Oh, you're talking about downtown street.
Downtown Street, yeah.
Yeah, they clean.
So they clean up. They are good. We see to go. One, we saved one there. But she relocated to her family out of the stage. So that's thanks one.
But I'm also thinking, because it came up a lot in our panel and some of like the minimal research that I'm doing has to do with that transition, like you were talking about when they get out of jail.
Yeah.
What's the plan? Like if you just like literally throw somebody out of jail and give them a bus ticket, like I feel like that's such a big gap. So I'm looking for some information on where things have worked, what programs have worked, and I need some help on that.
And I know that our jail they're working on getting some additional program coordinators that their sole job is to work on that transition,
Right.
And work with those people to get them to where the next step is,
Right.
not walking out the door.
Yeah.
And so it's that same thing. It's getting those positions, getting them, and then getting them to connect with all the resources. Here's a place to go, not walking straight out on the street where they used, getting them to another safe environment that is not that trigger.
Maybe we can use the unused or underused child, the juvenile delinquent law. And she said it only has a few people. Maybe they could put part of that to be it's a beautiful facility. It has a lot of money spent on it. And we could.
And then there's a transition center here or not?
The sobering center?
Well,
Sobering center? I think in all the plans are in place, everything is going through all the processing. I want to say they said like fall of 2024 is about the timeline that they'll have it fully in retrofitted, ready to go. And that was before that was actually run by Janus. And so they were able to sit with them and start working on resources, stuff like that. It wasn't law enforcement based. So it was a good conduit for that aspect of it, of trying to get them, picked up. And that's for your under the influence, drunken publics and first time DUIs. And because even you think about your younger first time DUI events, even the process of going into an intake, photographs, fingerprints, all that type of stuff can spiral them, where going into here, they can start getting some of the resources and they may be more adaptive to taking those resources to help them if they have a problem rather than just report a city.
So with the resources, because I know you mentioned like you guys are working on the program coordinators, like when they get out. You guys have anything taking place while they're in there before they get out? Like you guys have a list of those that's going to be released. Because that's something that I've talked with like in the past, like getting into the jails, meeting them before they get out, meaning everything's already lined up. So when they get out, everything's already in place, rather than, okay, now you're out, here you go. So with that.
Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs of all their programming. I know they have some and they do try and get them transition the best they can. But like I said, right now there's like 40 people in there that are the court has said that they're clear to go to a program. We just don't have a program to send them to. So we just don't. So they sit in jail, and they're not gaining anything by this.
Exactly. So what do we do to get you? I know you're a bad. Where do we go? Who do we pressure to get those funds? Is it the city council and the supervisors, or do we have to go to Jimmy Panetta, or do we have to go to Governor Newsom? Because I have all of them.
It's got all of it. The reality of it is, as a community, we only have like our funding sources only so big, but getting with assistance from state funding and that type of stuff can help build that out. So a lot of it's reaching out to the state level to get the funding so that we have beds to send these folks to.
Right.
Because we just don't have it. I mean, when you talk about mental health and there's a lot going on with juvenile mental health right now. They have 2 beds at our behavioral health.
What do you see? What do you see? Sorry. Go ahead.
I personally. And then we just disappeared.
Yeah.
He's alive. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's starting young. I mean, I can think of a presentation I had 8-ish years ago at a junior high, and I had a junior high kid at like 14, 15 years old come up to me, thank me for the presentation, tell me that he had 6 months sober from heroin.
Oh my God.
There is a county that's a juvenile justice division. And it's one of the few inspectors, I think it's the only commission in the county that is mandated by law. Because it's optional, you want to call it that. And you look it up on the county website, and they meet and it's open to the public. And we want to take some of the concerns there. I can tell you, because I do know this, one of the biggest concerns is the lady here was addressing, is that Monterey doesn't want our kids. I know that, I've heard that. They don't want our kids for a variety of reasons. But what we're having to do now is take in the youth and we're sending them in Sonoma. Now, if you look at the demographic of who goes into even on our hall, we have 35% of our population Latino in the county. So about 95% of kids in the juvenile hall go into. So you take the kids from the lowest income level, and Sonoma. How do the parents go to see it? Well, we know that the kids not going to make it if they don't have
The family that's important, yeah.
So it goes right back to this. Once we have a jail, the old days, we wanted to go to They walk right down to the beach when it's like two buttons. So you gotta have a strategic plan.
Exactly.
Hiding the mules, you got the husband, you have the post, they have the short.
And the thing is when you look at our population, like in our juvenile halls, we're talking juveniles. Most, if not all right now, are for violent crimes, a lot of homicides.
And
But with the change, with the change in the laws, and the way that it works, juveniles can no longer be tried as adults. So what that means is that these individuals, these juveniles are going to be back as members of the society.
Yeah.
And so and right back here. And so if we don't do some sort of steps while they're doing their time at a juvenile level, they're just going to be completely institutionalized and not in a good way when they come out.
There's a program that you can look all this, most, this main probably organization, state of California, Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, because they need to rehabilitate more of them. The good is they have the most powerful union in the state. And that's why they want the prisons closed. It's a different job to do. So I'm not a big fan of it, as you can tell. It's really complex, and I think that's why you keep saying a good place to start is to read the grand jury report about the homeless. Here, that was very comprehensive. There's a grand jury report about the county jail. Read that, so it's a little off, but you get the flavor of it. And take a look at what their old neighbors with these programs. Same thing with the probation. The probation program for the model organization here in the state of California. But they spent billions of dollars and we're not going to see how it results. I can say that we have been at this a long time. I'm not impressed. And, so do your homework. So then you can do it.
Yeah.
And, there are no questions.
I was going to ask you if you have time, like how did it go? There was a big encampment there to the defense office recently.
It's all city of Santa Cruz. Yeah, no, we don't, it doesn't touch county until you get to Paradise Park.
Okay, got it.
We're right at the Paradise Park line. That the hillside of Highway 9 is all city. We have a small little swath along the riverway and then to Ocean Street extended.
Okay.
But no, that everything, because we had heard a lot about that issue and more or less a lot of events then folks just moved up to the Poganet. And so we actually hiked it. And we geo-plotted all the camps and all of them drops within the city.
Got it. All right. Nick, you're the best. Thank you so much. You're always like willing to stick around and
No, it's all good. Nice meeting you.